Actually, I wanted to propose a toast. I wanted to propose a toast to Arliss and her enduring legacy to benefit all of Alaska.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here.
Well, I've always been very, very motivated. It sounds odd, but I set goals and then I go do it. I believed in myself. I knew where I wanted to go and I knew it was up to me. Nobody was going to make it easy. It wasn't a case of retreating or failing or saying, I'm sorry, that's too hard. I just did it. I was always a goal setter, and I guess I still am at my advanced age.
Alaskans love this land of ours. There's so many places that would not be protected for Alaskans if it weren't for Arliss Sturgulewski.
She started at the bottom and worked her way up.
She was way more interested in information than in power.
Arliss never let partisan issues get in her way of doing what she thought was the right thing.
There wasn't a lot of, hey, lady, have a cigar and vote my way.
She's good at thinking about, okay, how will this affect the entire community? How will this affect us as a state?
When Arliss says, how are you, she really wants to know. And I think that sums it up. She really wants to know.
She's a fabulous citizen and a good friend.
She is my hero because she broke trail for women, and she broke trail for honest people to be able to seek and serve in public office.
Our people want and deserve financial security and economic strength, and governments at all levels that are unblemished by any stain of corruption.
We are at the University of Alaska, which is a place very dear to Arliss's heart. She spent a lot of time working on university issues, and he's even now on the University Foundation board. She's sort of a Renaissance woman, I would say, certainly as it related to her legislation. Arliss liked to ask questions. She liked to understand completely, and she wanted to know what a bill meant, what it did, and what the long-term effects were going to be. That was a little bit new to some people, especially these good old boys had been around for a long time, and they got exasperated with her. She didn't spend a lot of time cultivating power for power's sake because she didn't have to. It's not about self-aggrandizement. She still lives in the house that she and her husband built in the early 60s.
I was married in 1953. I chose this wonderful man from Chicago who, after World War II, he and a buddy came to Alaska. And he came up, he graduated from the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. He was just a real open, generous, happy guy. And I think it was a bit different from my personality. I'm much more serious, and I want to know how much money's in the bank. And he was different. He didn't give a darn. People owed him money. He loved everybody. Loved the fact that we had the sun. He was a construction engineer and traveled a good deal within Alaska and was killed on his way to a job out westward.
A twin-engine turboprop airliner with 39 persons aboard crashed today about 150 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska.
We'd just seen him to send him to the airport. I had the radio on, I was driving, I was going to the grocery store. No word to me first. The plane was down, everybody was lost.
The plane, on an internal Alaskan flight, reportedly exploded in air. There were no survivors.
And I had to tell that to my son when he came home from school, that your daddy's gone. And he said, "Mommy, you're lying to me." I wonder if my husband had lived, how different life would have been, you know? I was a at-home wife and mother and very happy there, but I was happy in my service in the Senate. I had 14 years there, and things I cared about. I was there with a purpose.
We have the human talent, the money, the natural resources, and the right location on the globe to be of service, not only to one another, but to the rest of the nation and to the world.
She set the bar for how people serve in public office and even how they seek public office.
I seek the support of all Alaskans to bring us together, to end any divisiveness which disrupts or endangers the future.
Traditional approach to seeking political office would be take a poll, find out what people want to hear, and then say those words. Well, what Arliss would do is actually know about the economic conditions of Alaska or know about education. It goes back to her participation in the League of Women Voters. It is our obligation in her mind to be an involved citizen.
I can still remember the very first League of Women Voters that I went to, and that turned me on to local government.
She was a Republican, I was a Democrat, but that didn't get in our way in terms of finding things that we could work on together.
And good Lord, there was plenty to do. You know, you build a community, and that takes a lot. You've got schools and roads and all kinds of things.
Arliss was very focused on openness, on public participation, and on making certain that there was enough process so that people could count on government to be predictable.
It was a time when we had a borough and we had a city, and we didn't always get along.
There were 117,000 people in Anchorage. The dividing line was Northern Lights, and the people who lived south of Northern Lights were generally still living on homesteads, so they had large lots and they didn't like government. When the question came, do citizens want to unify those two governments, Arliss was really important in listening to make sure that people were not going to have government shoved down their throat.
And it took people from the outside and the inside finally figuring out we ought to work together.
Arliss and I met in February 1975. She and I were both elected to the Anchorage Charter Commission. Arliss was very Republican, and I was very, very Democrat. One of the things that I've learned from Arliss is you got to do what's right. Not what's right for you, but what's right for your community.
Well, it just kind of opened the door to me, seeing the community and wanting things to work.
This is the three of you.
Yep, there's a picture of me as a child with my father and mom. Here's a picture of my grandfather, Roe Wright, Arliss's father. Mom grew up in northwestern Washington. She was a twin, and it was the days of the Depression. She was born in 27, so life was good, but life was not full of plenty.
Oh dear, it was a very different world. So we grew up really poor, but I don't think we knew we were poor. My father was a logger. He ran a small business. He was away from home a lot. My mom kept the family together. I was a lonely kid, I think. My mother, who died when I was quite young, she was an early teacher, loved reading and education. I was determined to get an education. I saw education as a way out and up.
When she wanted to go to college, her father said, well, no, because you'll just get married and it would be a waste of money. If the boys wanted to go to school, that was one thing, but I'm not going to contribute to this. She worked her way through college. She was a nanny, she was a waitress, she worked slinging hash in the construction camps up at Rostam.
I guess I decided at a very early stage, you either do it or it doesn't get done. And so I did it. I had Pioneer Family in Alaska, and I read an ad about some people that were going to come up the highway.
But the Alaska Highway is much more than a road, much more than a brilliant construction feat.
I answered that ad.
Better in alignment and grades than any road of comparable length on this continent.
I wouldn't say the road was in good shape, but it worked.
You're the first legislator I lobbied.
Oh.
And I went with Dana, and she said, let's go talk to Arliss because she'll listen.
Oh, yeah. And how did that turn out?
It turned out well.
I was afraid of that answer. I always ran like I had the Tasmanian devil at my heels. And I knocked on doors. Oh, Lord, did I knock on doors. Because I thought the people should know who they were electing. It was that simple. I wasn't running for any ego trip or anything else. It was to represent the people.
She was very receptive to ideas. People would come to her, or organizations would come to her and say, we would like to have this. And she would say, well, let me think about that. The topics of the things that she worked on and the bills that she sponsored were sort of eclectic.
I think her style was unique to the Alaska legislature at the time she got involved. Between statehood and the year 2000, we've only had 12 women elected to the state senate. Arliss brought a different perspective. It wasn't all black and white. Actually, you could reach an agreement with all the parties involved, and that didn't sit well with a lot of the guys that had been there for a long time. Compromise was a dirty word, and it was a sign of weakness to compromise. And I think that was the big difference that Arliss brought.
Well, my experience with Arliss was mostly in the Alaska State Senate, and I was very impressed by Arliss's involvement in the Alaska Permanent Fund.
The state of Alaska is able to give away money, a big chunk, to every man, woman, and child.
The checks were in the mail for the first Alaskans who received $1,000 apiece.
The permanent fund and how it's structured just didn't happen overnight. There were, different approaches, different values to it.
Arliss was chair of the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee, the go-to committee for issues involving oversight of state investments.
Every man, woman, and child who has lived here for at least 6 months is entitled to $1,000. It's oil money.
You were very aware that there were mistakes you could make. There was a lot of money. It was fairly easy to make big decisions involving a lot of money quickly.
$1.5 billion surplus? I think there's a lot of hungry people out here on the street that might need it.
I think they should look ahead to the future when the oil runs out.
There were those who wanted to use the permanent fund to invest in infrastructure in Alaska, to invest in housing mortgages, and then there were those who felt that this is a fund being established for the future generations.
In the development of this legislation, Arliss took the time to get a lot of input.
Arliss was in the forefront of those who wanted to spread the benefits of the permanent fund to the people of Alaska.
We here in Alaska think that the individual should have both the opportunity and the obligation to make some of those decisions themselves instead of having Big Brother do it for them.
It was really bringing people together that was the key to it, and I think that was defining legislation. I think it's worked pretty well.
I will call for a gathering of some of the best and most creative minds available to help us design a new economy, a quality of life of intellect, of fairness, and natural and environmental beauty.
The value of Arliss's contributions to Alaska have been her long-term view, her vision for the future that, we can have development, but we can also have conservation.
We had so much open land still 26 years ago. People weren't thinking in terms of having to protect places for the public use, but Arliss got it.
Arliss recognized and supported the ability of private landowners to make this decision, to donate or sell a conservation easement over their land, which meant that that parcel would always be conserved. Collectively, all the land trusts have conserved about 40,000 acres, 150 projects. And in many cases, these are landowners that have owned these properties for decades, and they think, I want to provide this legacy so that it will always be this farm, and the sandhill cranes will always be able to come here, and the public can see that. Those things are what keep our community sound, keep our community vibrant, economically healthy.
There's so many places that would not be protected for Alaskans 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the line if it weren't for Arliss Sturgulewski and that conservation easement legislation.
About asking.
They probably couldn't have gotten in to see it.
How many women were in the legislature when you first got in? What year was it?
1978.
Yeah.
It's really funny. We didn't all come together. We didn't have like a woman's caucus, but there were some powerful women that I served with. Betty Fahrenkamp was a great friend of mine, but she was so different. She drank whiskey at that time. I didn't, and she played cards with the boys, but I could have trusted my life to her.
That's what people say about you too, Arliss.
Well,
Except the whiskey.
Not the whiskey. Not the whiskey part.
Well, there's that too.
I am announcing today that I'm a candidate for governor of the state of Alaska. I'm seeking the support of all Alaskans, urban and rural, newcomers and old-timers.
When Arliss ran for governor, she was the only woman of a major party ever to step out for the highest office in the state. So just doing that alone was pretty incredible.
Alaska Republicans nominated Arliss Sturgulewski. She becomes the 5th woman in the country to be nominated for the governor's chair.
In '86, she was elected in the primary as a Republican candidate and lost that race to Steve Cooper.
There were people who thought it was outrageous in 1986 that a woman would be running for governor. What kind of an uppity person would do that because that's a man's job?
Then in '90, when she ran again, and she had a lot of support, she won the primary, and the primary campaign started, and all of a sudden Jack Coghill and Joe Vogler and a bunch of old gentlemen decided she wasn't conservative enough.
Her running mate abandoned her in the general election and went off with an independent candidate.
For the lieutenant governor candidate to walk away from her at the last minute, that was unheard of. It was unbelievable, and you have to say, if it was a man in Arliss's position, would it have happened?
And what happened was a Republican nominee for governor joined Arliss's campaign. That is an action that is indicative of the integrity of Arliss.
You know, I have stood up to the Republican Party. I've also worked through the process to try to get them to change. I have not been successful, but we will be, because a majority of Republicans, a majority of Alaskans are pro-choice. My record is very clear. It has been there. I believe in working through the system to make it better.
She would do what she felt was in the best interests of her constituents, in the best interests of the state of Alaska, and it really didn't matter what the party position was. Maybe that's why some people in her party had a hard time supporting her, frankly, because it was less about party and more about doing the right thing.
Obviously, I wasn't everybody's cup of tea, or I would have been governor. I don't think there was any one thing except that I think there was a barrier there that I helped overcome for those that followed, of being a woman and going for that job. And I don't regret it. It just happened because I did it twice.
Arliss Sturgulewski broke trail for every woman who sought political office after her.
She was the first really credible female candidate in this state for governor, and I think she comported herself very, very well in terms of getting people to think about the role of governor, the image of governor, and who you might elect as governor. I think many women have benefited from that.
Some of us at the table have traveled with Arliss in the summer, like one weekend of the summer, in our Roadrunners group, and we've all commented about how traveling with Arliss is like traveling with a rock star.
What's your favorite part of the state?
Well, the one that it took me the longest to get to that was on my list was Point Hope.
Oh.
But I did get to Point Hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arliss and I became close friends, and at some point we become family. Really, that was hatched because we're part of a group of friends called the Roadrunners that takes trips, one trip each year, somewhere in Alaska. And everywhere we go with Arliss, of course, she's this magnet. We've met really interesting people along the way.
I always loved those encounters. There's a lot of interesting people in this state, and there's always one more person to meet and learn their stories.
She wants to know, what are the young people doing? Are they finding jobs in their villages? Are they finding jobs in their communities? If not, why not? What's being done about it? She's relentless. She's the real deal.
While it's difficult to summarize all that she's done in a few sentences, we can describe Arliss as a dedicated public servant, as a bridge builder. She's an active champion for the wise use of Alaska's resources.
Congratulations, Arliss Sturgulewski, and thank you so much for all you've done for our state.
Thank you so much for a gimpy old girl who's still sort of getting around. It's wonderful.
I think what motivates Arliss is, it sounds trite, but it is a genuine concern about and love for Alaska.
She's not one to just sit and wait for things to happen. Arliss makes things happen. And even still today, she makes things happen.
People were transferred to Washington. And so their families, Andy Tuber is an example. You know, I think you have to, it's an action to come.
She wanted to do the right thing, and she wanted to make Alaska a better place, and she did, and continues to do so.
She's worked hard all of her life. She still is working hard on the issues that she cares about. For all of us, we want to be just like Arliss.
going to wait until Arliss gets down off the step here.
It may be spectacular.
For those of you that don't know, I am blessed to be part of the Sturgulewski family and have come to know her as more than an Alaskan leader, one whose heart and passion is in everything that she does, but as truly a genuine and beautiful human being.
So, been a great ride. It's a time for me to enjoy others and to listen to others' stories. I've written the pages of my life, and it's been a good life. And I don't have any great goals. I just want things to be good for people.